Welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written by Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Miami, Florida. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, American states on shortwave, Washington, D.C., memories of an eclipse, South Pacific Panorama, Pacific Island Radio, and our Japan DX report. It is true the District of Columbia in the eastern United States is not a state. It's designated as a district, and it's under the direct jurisdiction of the federal government. However, D.C., the District of Columbia, is a defined territory, a defined area, and it does have an interesting background in shortwave broadcasting. Before the colonizing powers from Europe arrived in the area, this part of the North American continent was home to the Nacotchtac Indians, who spoke a dialect of the Algonquin language. It was back on January 23rd in the year 1788 that James Madison, even before he was elected president, made a call for the establishment of a federal capital territory for the United States. 2 years later, Congress gave approval for a federal territory to be established along the Potomac River, and during the following year, this new city-to-be was named Washington, and the territory for this new federal city was named the District of Columbia. Originally, D.C. was an exact 10 miles square, derived from the states of Maryland and Virginia, though half a century later, the Virginia section was transferred back into the state of Virginia. These days, the entire District of Columbia is completely built up and densely populated. It is true a shortwave broadcasting station has never been established in Washington, D.C., but the federal capital has featured in several interesting aspects of shortwave broadcasting. Back in its very earliest days, for example, the Chronohertz station WWV was on the air at a Washington location, in the NBS building on Connecticut Avenue. Back then, WWV was also involved in the broadcast of radio programming, but that was never on shortwave. However, in December 1922, WWV began the transmission of standard signals only, and in May of the next year, these signals were transmitted also on shortwave, with many different shortwave channels in use. At the time, their transmitter was rated at just 1 kilowatt, and they utilized two antenna systems, one for medium wave and one for shortwave. These antenna systems were supported by freestanding lattice-work towers. At the beginning of the year 1931, WWV left Washington, D.C., and was rebuilt in nearby College Park, Maryland, though these days they're located in a country area in the state of Colorado. It was in 1924 that President Calvin Coolidge made a specific request to the Washington medium wave station WRC, and he asked them to commence a series of shortwave broadcasts beamed to Latin America. According to Elizabeth Fox in her document on Latin American broadcasting, these regular broadcasts consisted of Latin American music, feature items, and talks on current information. These shortwave broadcasts were beamed to the various countries of Central and South America, and the programming was focused on one country at a time. Although the specific shortwave station that carried these broadcasts is not mentioned, it is probable that it was either KDKA 8XS at 10 kilowatts or W2XAD with 25 kilowatts and W2XAF with 40 kilowatts. The United States Navy also installed shortwave stations in the D.C. area, including NKF at the Navy base in Anacostia and NAA in Arlington, Virginia, with controls in Washington itself. In July 1925, station NKF participated in transcontinental tests on shortwave with station W6XAD on the island of Catalina, just off the coast of Los Angeles in California. Among the frequencies in use for these cross-country test transmissions were 4205 kHz and 7195 kHz. During the year 1927, the Navy agreed to implement radio broadcast to South America via NAA with the program feed from the Navy headquarters in Washington, D.C. However, this project was never implemented. Then, just before he left office, Coolidge tried again, and he issued Executive Order 5067 on March 2, 1929, directing the Navy to begin the broadcasting of a regular schedule of programming for South America, and that 2 shortwave channels were approved, 6120 kHz and 9550 kHz. However, the new president, Herbert Hoover, never followed up on this matter, and this project was never implemented either. However, just 2 days after the executive order from the outgoing President Coolidge, the new incoming President Hoover was himself involved in a huge shortwave project. It was Inauguration Day for President Hoover, and AT&T established a multi-channel radio booth underneath the Capitol steps for the control and distribution of special event radio programming. A total of 6 microphones were installed, 2 for each distribution network, NBC, CBS, and newsreel cameras. The radio programming was fed into the nationwide network of medium wave stations throughout the United States, and on shortwave it was beamed both east and west. From RCA Bolinas in California, the Inauguration Day programming was beamed to Honolulu for rebroadcast by medium wave KGU, and also to Tokyo and to Richard Byrd in Antarctica. Other shortwave transmitters at other locations also relayed the programming to Europe. There was also another shortwave project on Inauguration Day, and this was coordinated by medium wave station WRC. A small shortwave transmitter was installed on an Army airplane that was in the air above Washington, D.C. The live reports from the commentator on board the plane were relayed over station WRC with 500 watts on 640 kilohertz. It was on June 8, 1937, that the Pacific world observed a most remarkable eclipse of the sun. It was the longest total eclipse in more than 1,000 years, lasting for a full 93 seconds. The National Geographic magazine and the American Navy cooperated in providing resources for worldwide radio coverage of the event. A portable remote transmitter, W10XEP, with 25 watts on an apex channel around 30 or 40 megahertz, was taken to isolated Enderbury Island, and a 1 kilowatt composite shortwave transmitter, WMEF, was installed on the Navy vessel Avocet. This ship transmitter, weighing around 5 tons, was made up from parts previously in use with station KNRA on another ship, the Seth Parker, and portable WOEH that had been on an aerial balloon and in different airplanes. During the 1937 eclipse, shortwave commentaries from W10XEP on Enderbury and WMEF on board the Avocet at Canton Island were picked up by RCA Bolinas in California and relayed nationwide on medium wave. On at least one occasion during the eclipse events, station WMEF made a radio broadcast on shortwave that was directed to station W3XZ in Washington, D.C. This broadcast was logged by international radio monitors in the United States, and it was reported in the DX Bulletin from the International Shortwave Club. It is known that there was a shortwave station in Washington, D.C. under the call sign W3XZ during the years 1930 to 1934, operated by Francis Jenkins, and it was in use, at least on some occasions, for experimental TV broadcasts in the mechanical mode. However, the eclipse broadcast received at W3XZ was in 1937, 4 years after the Jenkins station was closed and deleted from government records. We would ask the question then, who or what was the 1937 station under the call sign W3XZ? It could have been a recycled call sign or a revived call sign, though it was not at that time an amateur station. The 1937 eclipse broadcasts were under the auspices of NBC, RCA, the U.S. Navy, and the National Geographic magazine, so in some way it was connected with all 3 of these organizations. Will we ever know what is the answer and what was the real connection? Maybe there's someone out there who does know the answer. And while we're speaking about the 1937 eclipse of the sun, did you know that another eclipse of the sun will take place out in the same areas of the Pacific next Friday, May 10th. And before we leave the story of shortwave broadcasting in Washington, D.C., we should mention the massive studio facility operated by the Voice of America at its world headquarters on Independence Avenue on the edge of the famous National Mall. Construction of the large building, covering one city block, was completed in 1940, and the studios for the Voice of America were transferred into this building from a temporary location in New York City 15 years later in 1954. The original master control unit for switching all VOA programming to the transmitter locations throughout various areas of the world was constructed by Gates Radio. An upgraded and enlarged master control was built by Utah Scientific and installed by VOA engineers in 1987, and a new digital version was manufactured and installed by Harris Broadcast in 1999. Tours of the VOA studio facilities are conducted each working day, beginning at 12 o'clock midday.
Now, news from the Voice of America. Accused Boston Marathon bomber unable to speak, and tens of millions of dollars more aid for Syrian rebels. I'm Christopher Cruz reporting from Washington. The surviving suspect in the Boston Marathon bombings is in the hospital in serious condition.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Hello, I'm David Rickwish in Wellington, and welcome to our series of programs looking at radio heritage in New Zealand. Today we're taking a look along the local radio dial and listening to the sounds of Pacific Radio in New Zealand. By this we mean the music, information and entertainment for Pacific Islanders living here, and the programs both in English and in the local languages which they can enjoy. The music we started off with today comes from the album Vahini Tahiti and is called Pene Ai and sung by Emma, and it's typical of the music now heard coming from taxicabs, markets, corner stores, factories, offices and homes all over Auckland and other parts of New Zealand.
In this interesting radio program from New Zealand, David Rickwish goes on to tell the story about the introduction and development of Pacific Island local radio stations throughout New Zealand, and he makes reference to their format, music, and languages. Then he concludes with a quick station ID, followed by a piece of typical island music, instrumental and vocal.
I'm David Rickwish from the Radio Heritage Foundation in Wellington, hoping you've enjoyed these sounds of contemporary Pacific radio produced in association with Radio New Zealand International.
That edition of South Pacific Panorama came to us from David Rickwish at Radio Heritage in New Zealand, courtesy of Adrian Sainsbury at Radio New Zealand International. You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Let's go to Japan now. Here's Yukiko Tsuji with her DX report for this month.
Hello and welcome to the DX report of the month from Japan Shortwave Club, aided by Toshi Otake, and I'm Yukiko Tsuji. We have quite a few DX reports from our club members this week. KBS World Radio from South Korea was heard on 9580 kHz on March 31st from 0200 to 0300 UTC in English. SIO rating was 454. Programs heard were News, Seoul Report, and Worldwide Friendship, including Indian DX Report. Radio Australia via T8WH Palo was heard on 17800 kHz on April 6 from 0400 to 0500 UTC in Indonesian. SIO rating was 454. ID of T8WH Palo was given at 0400. Then news and current affairs were aired. Business English lesson was started at 0435. Radio Kuwait was received on 15515 kHz on March 31st from 0757 to 0815 UTC in Arabic. SIO rating was 353. Talk program was broadcast and ID was aired at 0800. Saudi Radio was heard on 9675 kHz on March 31st from 2035 to the sign-off at 2054 UTC in Turkish. SIO rating was 454. Talk program was on the air and they signed off after national anthem. Voice of Turkey was heard on 13710 kHz on April 6 from 1245 to the sign-off at 1254 UTC in Urdu. SIO rating was 252. They broadcast a talk program and signed off after the interval signal. Vatican Radio was received on 11625 kHz on April 6 from 2055 to 2059 UTC in French. SIO rating was 544. Talk program and interval signal were aired, and they signed off at 2059. Radio Belarus was heard on 11730 kHz on April 6 from 2126 to 2135 UTC in English. SIO rating was 453. Talk and music programs were heard. Radio Algerine from Algeria via France was received on 11765 kHz on April 1st from 2045 to 2057 UTC in Arabic. SIO rating was 353. Quran recitation and a talk program were heard, but an Iranian station interfered at 2057. Radio Rwanda was in excellent reception condition on 6055 kHz from 2045 to 2055 UTC in French. SIO rating was 544. Music program was on the air. Radio France International via Mayaton, South Africa was heard on 15170 kHz on March 31st from 0725 to 0755 UTC in French. SIO rating was 353. News program was broadcast. WEWN from Vandiver, USA was heard on 11520 kHz on April 7th from 0900 to 1000 UTC in English. SIO rating was 353. The programs heard were Defending Life and Holy Rosary. RAE Argentina was received on 15345 kHz on April 1st from 1000 to 1100 UTC in Japanese. SIO rating was 353. Argentine Tango special program was broadcast. Finally, Japan Shortwave Club issued QSO cards for the correct reports on that segment of Wavescan program. we are issuing QSL card by email to the report sent by email. Our address for your email report is jswcqsl@live.jp. I repeat, jswcqsl@live.jp. We continue to issue the printed QSL card by the same system as before. Your report should be addressed to JSWC PO Box 44, Kamakura, which is Kamakura, postal code 248-8691, Japan. $1 LC or $2 for return postage will be appreciated. For this edition of DX Report, we'd like to thank Mr. Iwao Nagatani, Mr. Mitsunori Kawazoe, Mr. Chiaki Shimada, Mr. Mikoto Kidera, Mr. Hiroyuki Akiba, and Mr. Satoshi Miyashita for sharing the information with us. Thank you for listening, and please join us for our next edition of DX Report of Japan Shortwave Club. I'm Yukiko Tsuji in Tokyo.
We end today's edition of Wavescan with some Italian jazz from Mario Menicali, I Poeti del Mare. Thanks for listening to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written by Dr. Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis, Indiana. Next week on Wavescan, focus on Africa, the BBC East Mediterranean Relay Station in Cyprus, Part 3. Our ancient DX report for 1903, and our monthly DX report from the Philippines. Reminder that if you'd like a Wavescan QSL card, you can send your reports to us at the address we'll give you in just a moment. 2 QSL cards are available, one from AWR, another from WRMI. Paper scripts of Wavescan are available direct from the AWR office in Indianapolis, available each week by email. You can contact us at the email address we'll give you in a moment. You can also find Wavescan scripts at ontheshortwaves.com with Jerry Berg. It's ontheshortwaves.com. Also from Radio Heritage in New Zealand and in various radio magazines. Our address for your reception reports is Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. It's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. Our email address is wavescan@awr.org. Wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Miami. Till next week, good listening.
Ore infinite come costellazioni e onde, spietate come gli occhi della memoria. Altra memoria non basta ancora. Cose svanite, facce e poi il futuro. Saranno scontri, saranno cacce coi cani e coi cinghiali, saranno rincontri